We had talked about this a little bit before, but I was hoping that you could expand on it a little bit. Talk about sort of the what you thought about the political outlook of the other staff. Obviously there was things like Vietnam. The civil rights movement had been really important in what WRVR covered before your time there. I know there was, sort of WBAI had this reputation as being sort of a
that would consider them
progressive.
left.
Yes.
You would consider them.
Yes.
The people at Pacifica would be very happy if various presidents and administrations fell. Especially during the Vietnam War, especially during Watergate, and people like the late Larry Josephson were very happy to go on the air and point fingers at elected officials. I would say that, you'd have to look at the documentaries and the news shows. I would have to say that the leaning was at least progressive. When I think of the guests, there were certain conservative guests, but I think there were guests, if you looked at them, were mostly liberal. My impression of just the church itself at the time, the politics of the church, was liberal. Here was this great institution overlooking Harlem. If you're in Harlem, you look up, and what do you see? You see the church, and because of the relationship with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and the staff that was here, it was clear that the church itself was paying attention to the civil rights movement. So we certainly were at WRVR, but we were also paying attention to the war, a little bit to the environment. The first Earth Day was when? 68 or 69? So there was a certain amount of environmental stuff. But in terms of the news division, it was a small group of scrappy people who felt, in the best sense of journalism, that they should hold elected officials' feet to the fire, they should ask tough questions, that they should not sugarcoat the news in any way. Robert Siegel was one of the afternoon newscasters and interviewers here. He went, I think, right from here to WRVR. He went from RVR to NPR. I worked with him at both places. Always a tough interviewer, a fair but a tough interviewer. But it's not, I don't know. Was it liberal in the sense the way MSNBC is liberal today? I don't think so. But I think if you looked at the guests, the subjects, the kind of programming, you wouldn't say it was Fox, you wouldn't say it was conservative. I know in the booking of guests for a roundtable talk show, there was always an effort to have balance, either in the guests or the questions. But my sense is if you went back and listened to a lot of stuff, you'd say, this was progressive or liberal. But just by covering certain subjects, audiences felt that you were, if you were interested in improving education, if you were interested in improving the welfare system, especially interested in civil rights and feminism, that put you in that camp. And my memory is that the shows probably would land there. But specifically, I know there was a fair amount of discussion about the Vietnam War because many of us had numbers. Many of us were in the selective service system. I had a number. A lot of the people I worked with could have served, or I don't know if anybody was a veteran on the staff. No, I've not thought about that. But Vietnam as a war and as something in the culture weighed heavily on us. And it was always in the news, along with questions of civil rights. And I can't think of what some of the other big issues were. I mean, there were issues that were specific to the city. I mean, crime was terrible. There were whole places in the city there you knew you couldn't go to. I mean, I wouldn't certainly go into Central Park. I wouldn't go into Times Square. I mean, people remember that they were colorful times now. Well, they were colorful, but they were very dangerous times because of crime, and I know we covered crime. But because it was public radio, I mean, it wasn't like the latest fire and the latest shooting. It was what can be done about it? How can lives be improved? Which was sort of the public radio approach. Okay, crime is terrible. Who's making a difference? What is happening in the prisons? Who is actually making prison reform? So that was very much in the wheelhouse of public radio coverage. It wasn't like we were always reporting the latest shooting or the latest stabbing. We were trying to find solutions. That's a vague memory. It may be a false memory, but I mean, it's where I came from, and it's what I traveled to my college radio station, and when I got to NPR, I was like, oh, right, this is the kind of stuff we were doing at RVR. So I may be making it up, but I don't think so. I think there's some truth there.